Hi, this is Julie from Connecting Japan, and we are going to do the last in our mission series today. And we are going to talk about the question is, what does it take to be a missionary? Now, obviously this is only going to be relevant for those who are from the Australian Christian churches that are looking to be missionaries. Obviously other organisations it will change. So let's just go straight into this. Obviously we're going to use the word missionary and field work interchangeably from the point of view that most people that become missionaries are overseas. That's not to say that there are missionaries here in Australia or that we do stuff in the local church, but when we're talking about that in this particular video, as most of our videos, it's actually to do with overseas alone. So we just thought we'd get that out of the way. To be a missionary, it's a lot of hard work and you can't rush it. That's something that obviously something we always need to remember, and it's something always in the back of our minds as well. There are times where people go, oh, I want to do this right now. That's fantastic, and it's great that you have a heart for that. But the reality is paperwork, board meetings, and making sure that you have all the boxes ticked are really important, and you want to be able to make sure that everything is correct. A lot of the time that people want to be missionaries, obviously there's a whole lot of reasons why they want to do that. But the most important thing is that God has called you to that role, whether he has spoken to you directly and you've spoken to your pastor about this, or you've had prophetic words, like more than one, about it, and also that you've experienced short-term mission trips as well, which we might touch on a little later. That the important part of that is the calling. Obviously, having a heart for missions really helps. So if you've served in your local church in some mission outreaches and those sort of areas really do help. It also helps with your approval process a little later on, which we might talk about. Obviously, your organisation will want to get to know you want to get to know them, and they'll clue you in on all sorts of things. I mean, ACCI is really good at that. We have fantastic resources and training and all sorts of ways they can help you get on your way to being on the field. So those things really help. One of the first things that they'll probably ask you in that interview is, what country have you considered? If not, maybe pray about it. Obviously, attending something like Pan Asia really helps if you haven't already thought about that, because you can get to meet different missionaries. You might have a particular heart for a particular people group or a particular aspect of missions that might be something that you might be really hungry and passionate about. For me personally, it's seeing people's potential, particularly in areas where they feel they are unloved or unwanted. And Japan's a really good place that we're going to that will really help us with that. Obviously you want to know what your skills and abilities are as well, and those sort of things really do help. But in saying that, it's not a be-all and end-all, because I know lots of missionaries that are not professionals in any shape or form, but they serve amazingly in the field. So one of the biggest areas people get freaked out about is the application process. Obviously, there's all the paperwork where you have to put in all your personal details, your skills, your degrees, if any licenses or any working with children checks or police checks that you need, and then there's the medicals that are involved. That is why no one ever goes on the field in a month's time. Those processes alone do take quite a while, and you've got a lot of things that you need to get through to ensure that every I's dot and every T's crossed. And obviously some of it will actually cost something. Obviously the other thing is training. Back in the old days, you had to have like a degree in anthropology. Nowadays, that's not the case. In some instances, having a degree going into a country is preferable. Example, Japan. If you have like an undergraduate, like a bachelor or higher, obviously it makes it easier for you if you want to learn, if you want to take a job in, say, English teaching. That's not the only positions available to foreigners in Japan, of course, for instance, but it is the main way that foreigners are able to get into a country. But in saying that, it's not always something you need everywhere you go, so that will vary from country to country. ACCI is putting out some amazing modules at the moment. There's about, the first 5 have been done, and I believe there's about 10 or 11. Should be finished about end of March in 2020. There's a cost involved there. Those give you the basics of everything that you'll need to know, the mechanics that what we're talking about now about missionaries, but it'll also go into biblical aspects of missions in scriptures, and be able to give you a better understanding and platform moving on to the field. So, but again, that will depend on what your organisation might do. They might have a different way of doing it altogether. It just alleviates people doing their bachelor, which will take about 3+ years, and that's time that you could probably use in another area in other ways, or it just delays you being on the field. Getting approval for funding. In far as ACC, Australian Christian Churches, goes, obviously once your pastor has approved that process, it goes up to your state executive. Well, that's how it works for us. There's a particular department of the mission board, and they go through the process of it, and it's almost exactly the same as a pastor, but there are a few differences to that. Obviously, it will go through your character. They might do some checks on whether there is any criminal records or anything. This is just part of the course for all organisations. They always check your criminal records because they want to make sure every candidate that goes out there is a good representation. The gifts and skills that we've talked about before, obviously your passion, endurance and readiness for the field. Obviously these things take time because, like, all board meetings don't always happen. There's times of the years that they're in session and sometimes they're not. Once the approval has been given, obviously the fundraising is open, so then you can approach churches, individuals. Obviously fundraising is only restricted by your creativity. It's not always about sausage sizzles and chocolates. There are a lot of different ways that people actually do fundraising. I know some actually hire out cinemas and fundraise, getting people to come in and see movies, or they do fashion shows. It's how long a piece of string is. So it depends on where you want to do that. Obviously, that's just one-off payments, but the most important thing is not the one-offs, but the monthly donations. So depending on where you are in the world, how much money that you need for living cost, ministry cost, and in the instance you have to come home for any reason or attend conferences, all that money goes towards that. So that will depend on how big a cost it is. Some countries are more costlier than others, Japan being one of them. And obviously, once you get to the 90% area of your funding, and you're ready to go. In saying that is the rule now with ACCI, that you actually have to have 90% before you can actually go on the field. It just protects people in the instances where they find themselves short on money, and that's never a good place to be. So obviously you've been on the field for a couple of years, then it's the first term, which is the 2 years. So, and after that point, normally most missionaries come back. The biggest issues that obviously they go through in that time period is you have the honeymoon period where you're really enjoying it, you're really getting to know people, it feels more like a holiday, but obviously you find out that it's not, because there is a lot of hard work to do, whether you're dealing with community projects, or you're actually working within a church as well, or partnering with local churches and other organisations. It'll be different for everybody, but there's a lot to take on board. I mean, we've gotten the advantages of being able to do most of our cultural work prior to going, but there is still more to learn. You can't expect to know all the language and all the culture before leaving. That's just not possible. Only by experience can you do that. There is the overwhelming feelings that you get from all that you have to know. There is the isolation and loneliness because it's not home. There is creature comforts that aren't there. There are foods that you will miss, and there will be times that you can't do everything that you want to do if you were here in your own home country. These are times where the mentor, particularly for ACCI field workers, comes into play, because in contacting them and speaking to them and sharing your experiences, he or she really can help you get yourself back on track if you find that you're having a really big culture shock. The other thing is that obviously most missionaries go through in their first year or so, is that the hard work might feel unfruitful because there is so much to learn and so much to know. It's not expected that everybody's going to know everything straight away. That's one of the most important things throughout the whole journey that I've learned, that is, we have to take it step by step. If we speed things up too much, then we might do ourselves some damage and delay things even more. So it's really important to know. Obviously, once that period has come through and you actually finished your 2 years and you go, oh, I'm done now, this is great. Then it's obviously decisions about what we've spoken about in a few other videos. Do you want to be a career missionary where you can talk about God and be involved in community development, or strictly community development? In that regard, the career missionary actually has to have a pastor's accreditation. And so where you've gone through the missionary process, going through the board and everything like that, it's a lot like that. So I'm not sure that's actually fully fledged pastors, but I mean, that part of it I can't tell you. But what I can tell you is that it's a big decision to make. And we are really looking forward to actually being able to be out there and be able to help in every regard possible. Obviously, there's learning in conferences. Obviously, the old saying is you never ever stop learning, and conferences are a great place to do that. Obviously, the ACCI actually meets with people from time to time at the conferences to clue them in on things and to keep them up to date, because we're out the fields more often than not, and we might not always have the up-to-date information available to us. So these are a really good opportunity. It is also a good opportunity to catch up with sponsors, whether they are at state conference or a national conference, and sometimes they actually come visit us at a Pan-Asia conference. So these are sort of areas that really help and help us to grow. I hope that's really helped you. I can only say, from the character point of view that we talked about earlier, if your heart breaks for what breaks God's heart, then this is the calling for you. I hope that you've enjoyed the videos, and we'll see you next time. Bye.